Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. Before the Tremor. Warren Alexander had learned early in life that blood didn't always make family, and family didn't always share blood. At 34, he'd built a quiet but successful career writing psychological thrillers, stories about people who underestimated the consequences of their cruelty. His readers loved the cold precision of his antagonist's downfalls. His wife, Alana, a trauma counselor at Cedar Ridge Hospital, often joked that he channeled his observations of human darkness into fiction instead of therapy sessions. They lived in Riverside, California, in a renovated 1960s ranch house that Warren had spent 2 years restoring. The wooden beams, the reinforced foundation, the earthquake retrofitting, he'd overseen every detail. His parents, Howard and Gladys Alexander, had called it excessive when he'd explained the safety measures. His sister Brenda, Flores, had laughed. "You've always been paranoid, Warren. Must be all those twisted books you write." 6-year-old Max was in the backyard, building an elaborate castle from wooden blocks. Warren watched from the kitchen window, coffee in hand. Max had Warren's careful attention to detail, though they shared no genetic code. Warren and Alana had adopted Max from foster care 18 months ago, after Max's biological parents had lost custody due to severe neglect. The boy had been 4.5, undersized, with haunted eyes that gradually learned to light up again. Dad, look," Max called, his voice pure sunshine now. Warren stepped outside. "That's the tallest tower yet, buddy. It's earthquake-proof," Max declared proudly. "Like you made our house." Warren's chest tightened with love, so fierce it almost hurt. "You're absolutely right." Alana emerged, her dark hair pulled back, already in her work scrubs. "Your mom called. Again. Sunday dinner is mandatory this week." "Your dad's exact words." Warren grimaced. Sunday dinners at his parents' house had become increasingly tense since the adoption. Howard, a retired insurance executive who measured worth in bloodlines and balance sheets, had never hidden his disapproval. Gladys, a former real estate agent whose social circle was her religion, worried openly about what people would think. Brenda, Warren's older sister by 3 years, had produced 3 biological children in rapid succession: Jason, 9, Leroy, 7, and Hayden, 5. She'd married Perry Flores, a commercial real estate developer who'd inherited his father's business. At every family gathering, Brenda made pointed comments about real grandchildren and carrying on the family name. "We don't have to go," Alana said quietly. "We do," Warren replied. "Watching Max, running from them teaches Max that their opinions matter. Facing them teaches him that we choose who we let in our lives, blood or not." What Warren didn't say, he'd been documenting everything. Every dismissive comment, every time his parents forgot Max's birthday but made elaborate celebrations for Brenda's kids, every family photo where Max was conveniently out of frame. A writer's habit, perhaps, or maybe something deeper, an instinct that someday he'd need evidence of exactly who these people were. Chapter 2. Fault Lines. Sunday arrived with typical California sunshine, deceptive in its cheerfulness. The Alexander family home in Highland, a sprawling 2-story house that Howard liked to call the estate, sat in a neighborhood where sprinklers ran despite drought warnings and every lawn was magazine perfect. Warren pulled up with Alana and Max. Through the large front windows, he could already see Brenda's 3 kids running wild inside while she scrolled through her phone. Perry's massive truck dominated the driveway, parked at an angle that forced Warren to park on the street. "Remember," Alana murmured to Max, squeezing his small hand, "you don't have to hug anyone you don't want to." Max nodded solemnly. At 6, he was already learning to read rooms, to measure safety. It broke Warren's heart and made him proud simultaneously. Survival skills no child should need, but skills that might protect him from different kinds of harm. Gladys opened the door before they knocked. At 62, she maintained an aggressively youthful appearance. Blonde highlights, Botox, designer athleisure. "Warren, Alana." "Oh, you brought him." "His name is Max, Mom." "Your grandson." "Of course." Gladys's smile was plastic. "Come in." Brenda and Perry are already here with the other children. Warren's jaw tightened, but Alana's hand on his back steadied him. They entered. The house smelled of Gladys's signature pot roast, though Warren knew she'd ordered it from the expensive market downtown and simply reheated it. Appearances over authenticity, the Alexander family motto, though it had never been spoken aloud. Howard sat in his leather recliner, reading the Wall Street Journal. He looked up, acknowledged Warren with a nod, ignored Max entirely. Closed the door. Air conditioning isn't free. Brenda descended from upstairs, her phone still in hand. At 37, she'd cultivated an influencer aesthetic, perfect makeup, curated casual wear, every moment Instagram ready. Her account, at Brenda Flomom, had 40,000 followers who watch her document authentic motherhood in carefully staged photos. Warren, you're late. She air-kissed near his cheek. Max, honey, why don't you go play in the basement? My kids are watching TV. He can stay with us, Warren said. I'm just trying to make things easier, Brenda said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. My 3 could be a little rough. You know how real siblings are with each other. There it was. Warren had learned to count the jabs. Real siblings, real grandchildren, real family, always wrapped in concern or humor, always with plausible deniability. Perry emerged from the kitchen, beer in hand. Warren, my man, how's the writing? Still doing that horror stuff. Psychological thriller. And it pays well enough. That's great, that's great. Perry's attention had already wandered. Howard, did you see the property listings I sent? That industrial complex in Ontario is a gold mine. The evening proceeded as they always did. Dinner was served on Gladys's good china, except Max received a plastic Disney plate that had belonged to one of Brenda's kids years ago. Conversation revolved around Brenda's children's achievements. Jason's Little League home runs, Leroy's straight A's, Hayden's piano recital. When Max mentioned his school art project, Gladys changed the subject. When Alana tried to share that Max had been selected for the gifted reading program, Howard interrupted with a story about Perry's latest business deal. Warren watched it all, filing it away. He caught Alana's eye across the table. She looked tired, hurt. They'd had this conversation a dozen times. Maybe it was time to stop coming. But Warren had a writer's instinct for narrative structure. You don't reach a climax without building tension. You don't leave the story unfinished. He just didn't know he was already in Act 2, and the earthquake was coming in 3 days. Chapter 3, Tremor. Wednesday afternoon, 2:47 p.m. Warren was in his home office, revising Chapter 12 of his new manuscript, when the world started shaking. It began as a gentle sway, the hanging lamp above his desk beginning to dance. Then, a violent lurch. Books flew from shelves. His coffee mug shattered. The roar was deafening, like a freight train tearing through the foundation. Earthquake, Warren shouted, though the sound was swallowed by the chaos. He ran to the hallway. Alana. Max. Alana stumbled out of their bedroom. Kitchen. Max is in the kitchen. They moved together, practiced in drills they'd run monthly since the adoption. Get to the child. Protect the child. Everything else is replaceable. The kitchen was a disaster, cabinets swinging open, dishes cascading, the refrigerator sliding. And there, Max, frozen under the heavy wooden dining table, his small hands gripping the table leg, his eyes wide with terror. Stay there, buddy, Warren shouted, just like we practiced. Cover your head. The shaking intensified. Warren and Alana crouched in the doorframe, writing it out. 30 seconds. 45. A full minute of the earth trying to tear itself apart. Then silence. Terrible, ringing silence. Max. Warren crawled forward. The table had held. Max was safe, crying but unharmed. Warren's phone buzzed frantically. Text messages flooding in. The first one made his blood run cold. MOM. Major quake. We're heading to Brenda's house. She's closer. Then another. Brenda. Mom and Dad on their way. Perry's in San Diego. House is a mess. Kids were inside. Warren's fingers flew. We're okay. Max is safe. Stay safe yourselves. No response. He turned to Alana. I need to check on them. Warren. I know, but they're still family. And Brenda's kids. Alana nodded. They'd done their own safety check. Structural damage, minimal thanks to Warren's retrofitting, but water line broken, some cracks in walls. Max was the priority. Take Max to the Johnsons next door, Warren said. The Johnsons were a retired couple, prepared and calm. I'll go check on Brenda's house. Be back in 30 minutes. He kissed Max's forehead. You were so brave, buddy. Just like we practiced. Dad, don't go, Max whispered. Something in Warren's chest cracked. I'll be right back. I promise. The drive to Brenda's house in Highland took 20 minutes through traffic chaos and damaged roads. Warren's hands gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing through building codes, structural integrity, earthquake protocols. Brenda's house was worse than he'd expected. The two-story Tudor revival had aesthetic charm, but Warren had always noted its poor seismic design. Now, the garage had partially collapsed. Roof tiles littered the yard. The front door hung at an angle. Howard and Gladys's car was parked crookedly in the driveway. Warren ran forward. Brenda. M.O.M. Dad. Brenda stumbled out the front door, carrying Hayden. Her face was streaked with tears and dust. Warren. Thank God. Your parents are inside with Jason and Leroy. I can't get to them. Howard emerged, supporting Leroy, who was limping but conscious. Gladys followed, clutching Jason. Is everyone out? Warren demanded. Yes, Howard said. We got all 3 kids. Warren's phone buzzed. A text from Alana. Neighbors said your parents went to Brenda's before the quake. Were there for lunch? Warren's blood went cold. He looked at his father. You were already there? Before the earthquake. We had lunch with Brenda, Gladys said. When it hit, Howard and I immediately went to get the children. All of them? What? You got all 3 kids out during the earthquake? Of course, Howard said, affronted. What kind of question? Warren's phone rang. Alana. Her voice was frantic. Warren, Mrs. Johnson just told me something. Your parents' car was seen at Brenda's house at 2 p.m., an hour before the quake. Warren closed his eyes. The timeline crystallized, sharp and terrible. Another text came through, this one from his neighbor, sent in the chaos he'd missed earlier. Saw your parents' car at your house at 2:30. Saw them leave at 2:40. Thought you should know. Warren looked at his parents. At Brenda. The pieces fell into place. You were my house, he said quietly. Before the earthquake. Gladys's face went white. We stopped by, Howard said. You weren't home. We left. During the earthquake, Warren continued, his voice deadly calm. You were at Brenda's house. You rescued her 3 children. Yes, Brenda said. Thank God they were here. But you'd been to my house right before. You knew Max was there. Alone. In the kitchen. We talked about his schedule yesterday. He gets home from school at 2:30 on Wednesdays. Alana's shift ends at 4. The silence stretched. Warren, Gladys started. We didn't think. You didn't think to check if your grandson was safe? You didn't think to go back. There wasn't time. Howard's voice rose. Brenda's house was closer. We had to make a choice. You made a choice, Warren repeated. The words tasted like ash. You chose 3 grandchildren over 1. He's adopted, Warren, Gladys said. And there it was, the truth, naked and ugly. He's not really our grandson. We had to prioritize our blood, our family. Warren turned and walked to his car. Warren, Brenda called. Don't be dramatic. Everyone's safe. That's what matters. He drove home in silence. The truth played on a loop. His parents had driven to his house around the time Max got home from school. Maybe to drop something off. Maybe just being controlling as usual. They'd seen Max was there, probably saw him through the window, doing homework in the kitchen. Then the earthquake hit, and they'd made a choice. They'd left Max alone in a collapsing house and raced to save Brenda's children. Warren found Max at home. Alana had brought him back after Warren's text that everyone at Brenda's was safe. Max was sitting on the couch, a blanket around his shoulders, drawing a picture. He looked up when Warren entered. Dad, you're back. Warren gathered his son into his arms. Max's small hands clutched his shirt. Over Max's shoulder, Warren met Alana's eyes. She knew. Somehow she knew. Did Grandma and Grandpa save Aunt Brenda's kids? Max asked. Warren's throat closed. Yes, buddy. They did. That's good, Max said simply. I'm glad they're okay. It was that kindness, that pure, undeserved kindness, that something crystallized in Warren's mind. 45 minutes later, after Max was settled with coloring books and Alana nearby, Warren's phone lit up with calls and texts. "Mom, we're so sorry. Please understand. We didn't have time. Dad, don't be unreasonable. Everyone is safe. That's what matters. Brenda, why are you making this about you? My kids were traumatized." Warren read each message. Then he typed a single word in response to all three. Noted. He set down his phone, opened his laptop, and began to type. Not a novel this time. Something else entirely. The revenge of a writer is patient, meticulous, and absolutely devastating. And Warren Alexander had just started writing the most important story of his life. Chapter 4, Documentation. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in selective concern. Warren's phone exploded with messages from his parents and Brenda, but none of them asked about Max. Not once. "Gladys, Warren, please call us. We need to talk about this rationally. Howard, you're being childish. We made a split-second decision in a crisis. Show some maturity. Brenda, Mom and Dad are devastated. How can you be so cruel? My kids ask why Uncle Warren is mad at Grandma and Grandpa." Warren saved every message. Screenshots, backups, cloud storage. The writer in him knew that narrative required evidence. The father in him was building an ironclad case. What his family didn't know, Warren had been documenting their behavior for 18 months. Every slight, every forgotten birthday, every cruel comment disguised as concern. He had a private folder on his laptop titled Research Notes, 73 pages of dated incidents, with witnesses when available. But he needed more than a personal chronicle. He needed the truth to have consequences. Thursday afternoon, Warren drove to Brenda's neighborhood. Not to her house, to the neighbors. Mrs. Claudette Levine, an 82-year-old retired teacher who'd lived on that street for 40 years. She'd always been kind to Warren, often commenting that his parents seemed rather cold. She invited him in for tea. "Mrs. Levine, I need to ask you something. On Wednesday, during the earthquake, did you see my parents?" Her eyes sharpened. "I did, honey. They were already at your sister's house. Must have been there an hour or more before that shaking started. Did you see them leave the house during the earthquake?" "Oh, yes. Your father carried one boy, your mother had another, and Brenda had the little one. Moved fast as lightning to get those children out." She paused. "Warren, dear, I heard them talking after. In the driveway. Your mother was on the phone with someone, maybe a friend. She said something about making a choice." Warren's hands tightened on his teacup. What exactly did she say? Mrs. Levine looked uncomfortable. She said, "We don't have time for him. He's not really our grandson." I assumed she meant. She trailed off, seeing Warren's expression. "Oh, honey, she meant your Max. Would you be willing to write that down? Sign it." "Of course." "Warren, I'm so sorry. That's unconscionable." Warren collected 3 more witness statements that week. Mr. Ronnie Gill, who lived across from Warren's house, had seen Howard and Gladys's car parked outside at 2:35 p.m. Wednesday. He'd watched them peer through the front window, then drive away. Mrs. Jean Clayton, Brenda's other neighbor, had heard the entire conversation in the driveway, including Howard's comment. "The boy isn't our problem. He'll be fine on his own." Each statement was notarized. Warren was building a legal foundation, though he wasn't sure yet what structure he'd build on it. Meanwhile, Alana had her own investigation. As a trauma counselor, she had connections throughout Cedar Ridge's medical and social services network. She made calls, asked careful questions, and discovered something interesting. Howard and Gladys Alexander had been quite vocal at their country club about their disappointment in Warren's adoption decision. They've been telling people Max has behavioral problems, Alana reported Friday evening, her voice tight with anger. Complete fabrications. They've said he's violent, disturbed, a burden. Warren, they're trying to poison the well, making it seem like their behavior is justified because Max is somehow difficult. Warren added it to his documentation. Defamation, another thread to pull. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source, Brenda's own social media. Warren created a fake account, a middle-aged woman named Darlene Landry from Arizona. He scrolled through 18 months of a Brenda Flomom content, public posts, carefully curated images of her 3 biological children, and there dozens of posts about the difficulties of dealing with adopted children in the extended family, about protecting your kids from outside influences, about the importance of real family bonds. One post from 3 months ago made Warren's blood boil. Sometimes you have to protect your children from relatives who make questionable choices. My kids ask why their cousin is different. How do I explain adoption trauma without scaring them? Hashtag MomLife, hashtag Real Talk, hashtag Protective Parenting. The comments were worse. Other parents chiming in with agreement, some explicitly discussing how adopted children were risky, damaged, not the same as your own. Brenda had created an entire online narrative casting Max as an outsider threat to her perfect family. Warren saved every post, every comment, every hashtag. Saturday morning, the apology visit happened. Warren watched through the front window as Howard, Gladys, and Brenda pulled up. They coordinated their arrival, a united front. Gladys carried a store-bought cake. Howard had a wrap present. Brenda held a bouquet of flowers. Warren opened the door before they knocked. He didn't smile. "Warren," Gladys began, her voice quivering, "we've come to apologize. We were wrong. We were so wrong. We panicked," Howard added. "In the moment, we made a terrible decision. But we're here to make it right." Brenda stepped forward, tears already streaming. "I told Mom and Dad they needed to come here, needed to apologize to you and Mac's family. Is everything, Warren. We should have." "Stop," Warren said quietly. They fell silent. "You came to apologize to Max?" "Yes," Gladys said. "We brought him a present, and we'd love to take him for ice cream, spend some quality time." "No, Warren," Howard's voice hardened. "You're being unreasonable. We've acknowledged our mistake. What more do you want?" "The truth," Warren said. "Tell me the truth. When you came to my house Wednesday before the earthquake, did you see Max through the window?" Silence. "Did you know he was home alone?" "Warren," Gladys whispered, "we didn't think." "Yes or no?" "Yes," Howard finally said. "We saw him. We were going to come back. You drove to Brenda's house instead. You were there when the earthquake hit, and you made a choice. We had to save Brenda's children." Gladys's voice rose. They were screaming. The house was collapsing. "You could have called me, texted me, called 911, and said a child was home alone at my address. You could have done anything except what you did." "Which was?" Brenda challenged, her tears drying up, her voice turning sharp. Warren looked at his sister. "Which was to decide that Max wasn't worth saving because he's not your blood." "That's not fair," Brenda snapped. "You're twisting this into—" "I have 4 witnesses," Warren said calmly, "who heard you say, in the driveway, we don't have time for him. He's not really our grandson." Gladys went white. Howard's jaw clenched. "You've been telling people at your country club that Max has behavioral problems," Warren continued. "You've been posting on social media about the difficulties of adopted family members. For 18 months, you've been building a narrative that Max is somehow less than, somehow wrong, somehow not worth your time or love." "That's private," Brenda said. "You can't. It's public. Everything you posted is public. I have screenshots. What do you want?" Howard demanded. "An apology? Fine. We're sorry. We made a mistake. Now, let's move forward as a family." Warren looked at each of them. His parents, who'd raised him with cold efficiency and colder affection. His sister, who'd always been the golden child, whose perfection was her only real personality trait. "Noted," he said, and closed the door. Through the window, he watched them argue on his front lawn. Gladys crying, Howard angry, Brenda gesticulating wildly. Then they left. Alana appeared at his side, Max's hand in hers. "What now?" "Now," Warren said, "I write the story." Chapter 5, The Architect. Warren spent the weekend mapping his strategy. He'd written 15 novels about psychological manipulation, about antagonists who orchestrated their own elaborate downfalls. Now he'd write his masterpiece, and his family would be the protagonists of their own destruction. The plan had 3 phases, each designed to hit where it hurt most. Phase 1, Public exposure, his family valued reputation above all else. Howard's country club connections, Gladys's social standing, Brenda's influencer brand, all built on appearances. Warren would dismantle those appearances systematically. Phase 2. Legal consequences, child endangerment. Emotional abuse. Potential grounds for a civil suit. Warren wasn't interested in money, but he was interested in permanent records, court documents, official findings that would follow his family forever. Phase 3. Social isolation. Make them face the same exclusion they'd imposed on Max, turn their community against them. Let them feel what it's like to be the outsider. But Warren needed allies. He couldn't do this alone. Monday morning, Warren met with Ezekiel Griffith, a family law attorney and former college roommate who'd built a reputation defending adoption rights. They met at a quiet coffee shop in Pasadena, far from Riverside. "EZ, I need your advice." Hypothetically, Ezekiel, a sharp-eyed black man in his late 30s, smiled grimly. "Counselor, you know I don't do hypothetical. Tell me what happened." Warren laid it out. The documentation, the witness statements, the pattern of behavior. Ezekiel's expression grew darker with each detail. "This is child endangerment," Ezekiel said flatly. "Your parents knowingly left a minor child in danger during a natural disaster." California Penal Code 273A. Potentially criminal charges. "I don't want them in jail. I want them to understand consequences." "Warren, what do you want?" "Really?" Warren thought of Max, drawing pictures of their family, always including Grandma and Grandpa, even though they try to let him die. Max's infinite capacity for forgiveness was beautiful and heartbreaking. "I want them to lose everything they value," Warren said quietly. "Reputation, social standing, their carefully constructed image. I want everyone to know exactly who they are." Ezekiel nodded. "I can file a civil suit. Child endangerment, emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional harm. It won't get you money. Judges don't award damages in these cases unless there's significant medical costs. But it will create a public record. Court documents are public. Media can access them. And you happen to have a story that media would love. Grandparents abandon adopted grandson during earthquake to save biological grandchildren? That's national news, Warren, especially with your sister's influencer presence." Warren smiled. It wasn't kind. "Let's file." That evening, Warren made another call, this one to Jewel Dickerson, an investigative journalist he'd consulted with for research on his last novel. She worked for a regional newspaper with national syndication partnerships. "Jewel, I have a story for you." Warren Alexander calling me on a Monday night? Must be good. It's better than good. It's the kind of story that wins awards and changes laws. He laid out the basics. Jewel was silent for a long moment. "Jesus, Warren, this is your family. They stopped being my family when they chose to let my son die. I'll need documentation. Witnesses. Everything verified. I have it all. Notarized statements, screenshots, dated records. And I have something else. Proof of a pattern of discrimination against adopted children, all documented on social media by an influencer with 40,000 followers." Jewel whistled. "That's explosive. Okay, give me a week to build the story, verify sources, reach out to your family for comment. They'll deny everything. Of course they will. That's what makes it news." Tuesday, Warren received an unexpected visitor, Perry Flores, Brenda's husband. Perry arrived alone, looking uncomfortable. Warren almost didn't let him in, but curiosity won. "I'm not here to defend them," Perry said immediately, standing in Warren's living room. "I'm here because I need you to know something." "Which is?" "I wasn't there during the earthquake. I was in San Diego on business. Well, I got home and found out what happened, what Brenda's parents did." Perry ran a hand through his hair. "I was furious. I told Brenda we need to distance ourselves. But she won't listen. She's doubling down, saying you're overreacting. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I have 3 kids who are learning from their mother and grandparents that some people are worth less than others based on blood. And I want to have my children grow up believing that." Perry met Warren's eyes. "I filed for divorce. I'm taking primary custody of the kids. I wanted you to know before it becomes public." Warren was stunned. "Perry, I'm not asking for anything. I'm not asking you to forgive my in-laws or Brenda. I needed you to know that not everyone in this family is broken. Perry headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Max is a great kid. My boys love him. I've tried to make sure they know he's their real cousin, no matter what anyone else says. After Perry left, Warren added this development to his mental map. Brenda's husband leaving her, seeking custody, would destroy her influencer brand. The perfect family narrative would implode. Everything was falling into place. Wednesday evening, 1 week after the earthquake, Warren gathered Max and Alana in the living room. "Buddy, I need to tell you something," Warren said gently. "Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Brenda, they're going to be in the news. People are going to talk about what happened during the earthquake." Max looked worried. "Are they in trouble?" "Yes, because what they did was wrong. They left you alone when they knew you needed help. That's not okay. But they said sorry. Sometimes sorry isn't enough. Sometimes people need to face consequences so they learn not to hurt people again." Max was quiet for a long moment. Then, in his small, serious voice, "Dad, do you think they'll ever love me like they love Jason and Leroy and Hayden?" Warren's heart shattered. Alana was crying silently beside him. "No, buddy," Warren said, pulling Max close. "I don't think they will. And that's not your fault. That's their failure, not yours. You are wonderful and loving and brave, and you deserve better." "Okay," Max whispered. "Can we have pizza for dinner?" That was the moment Warren knew he was doing the right thing. Max would move forward, resilient and strong. But Howard, Gladys, and Brenda needed to learn that actions had consequences. The paperwork was filed. The journalist had her story. Phase 1 was beginning, and Warren Alexander was just getting started. Chapter 6, Ignition. Thursday morning, Brenda's world started burning. The divorce filing hit the gossip blogs first. Perry Flores, successful real estate developer, seeking sole custody of his 3 children from influencer Brenda Flores, née Alexander, citing profound disagreements about family values and character development of our children. Within hours, at Brenda Flomom's comments section exploded. "Family values? From you. What happened, Brenda? Trouble in paradise?" Finally unfollowing. "This fake perfect life is exhausting." Brenda called Warren 16 times. He didn't answer. Friday afternoon, Ezekiel filed the civil suit in Riverside County Superior Court. Warren Alexander and Max Alexander versus Howard Alexander, Gladys Alexander, and Brenda Flores. Causes of action: child endangerment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligence. The court filing was public record. Within an hour, Jewel Dickerson's article went live. Earthquake reveals family fault lines. Grandparents accused of abandoning adopted grandson to save biological grandchildren. The article was devastating. Jewel had done her homework. Witness statements, social media screenshots, a timeline of discriminatory behavior. She'd reached out to Howard, Gladys, and Brenda for comment. Their responses made it worse. Howard Alexander: "This is a family matter being exploited by a vindictive son." Gladys Alexander: "We love all our grandchildren equally. This lawsuit is baseless." Brenda Flores: "My brother is weaponizing a tragedy. We did our best in an impossible situation." But then Jewel quoted Max's kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Eileen Norton, who'd witnessed multiple family events. Max would come to school excited about Thanksgiving or Christmas with his family, only to return quiet and withdrawn. "He told me once that Grandma forgets I'm there. For a 5-year-old to recognize that kind of exclusion breaks my heart." The article included a photo, not of Warren or Max, but of Brenda's Instagram post about protecting your kids from questionable relatives. The juxtaposition was damning. By Friday evening, the story had gone national. TMZ picked it up. Twitter exploded with hashtag Adoption Matters and hashtag Max Alexander. TikTok creators made videos discussing adoption discrimination. Cable news invited Warren for interviews. Warren declined all media requests. The story spoke for itself. But he did release one statement through Ezekiel. "My son Max is 6 years old. He loves dinosaurs, building blocks, and telling terrible knock-knock jokes. He is kind, brave, and resilient." On May 12th, during a 5.8 magnitude earthquake, My parents and sister made a choice that revealed what they truly believe, that adopted children are worth less than biological children. This lawsuit isn't about money. It's about accountability. It's about making sure no family treats any child as disposable. The statement included a picture of Max in his earthquake safety gear, hard hat, whistle, emergency backpack, taken during one of their monthly drills. His smile was incandescent. The internet lost its collective mind. The photo became a meme, "Be like Max." Adoption advocacy groups rallied. The story was everywhere. Saturday, Howard's Country Club asked him to temporarily step back from his board position pending resolution of the current situation. Translation: they didn't want the scandal associated with their brand. Gladys received calls from 3 longtime friends, each canceling upcoming social engagements. Her real estate network, her identity for 30 years, was ghosting her. Brenda lost 15,000 Instagram followers in 48 hours. Brand partnerships sent polite emails. "We're reevaluating our collaboration in light of recent events." Translation: you're toxic now. But Warren wasn't done. Sunday morning, phase 2 began. Warren had been digging into his family's background all week, looking for leverage beyond the lawsuit. What he found was a gift. 3 years ago, Howard had served as executor for his own father's estate, Warren's grandfather, Edmund Alexander. The estate had included a substantial trust fund meant to be divided equally among Edmund's descendants. According to the will, this included all grandchildren by blood or legal adoption. Warren had never received Max's share. He'd never even known about it. Ezekiel filed an emergency motion Monday morning. Warren Alexander, as guardian of Max Alexander, seeking a full accounting of Edmund Alexander's estate and immediate distribution of Max's rightful inheritance. The motion included the original will language. It also included evidence that Howard had distributed funds to Brenda's 3 children but had omitted Max, despite Max being legally adopted and therefore legally entitled under the will's explicit language. That was embezzlement of trust funds, a felony. Howard's attorney called Ezekiel within an hour. "Your client is making a terrible mistake." "My client is protecting his son's legal rights," Ezekiel replied coolly. "If your client distributed trust funds in violation of the testator's explicit wishes, that's a crime. We can resolve this quietly. Full accounting, immediate distribution to Max, plus interest, or we can pursue criminal charges. You're destroying this family." "No," Ezekiel said. "They did that themselves." Monday evening, Warren received a visitor he didn't expect, his mother. Gladys stood on his doorstep, alone. She looked older than Warren had ever seen her. No makeup, hair undone, wearing a simple sweater instead of her usual designer wear. "Warren, please. Please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you let my son die. That you've been stealing his inheritance. That you've been telling your friends he's disturbed. I've made mistakes." Gladys's voice broke. "Terrible mistakes. But I'm your mother. I'm begging you, stop this lawsuit. Stop destroying our family. You stopped being my mother when you decided Max wasn't your grandson." "I was afraid," Gladys shouted. "Afraid of having an adopted child in the family. Afraid of what people would think. Afraid of losing control." She stopped, realizing what she'd admitted. Warren's voice was ice. "You just confessed, on camera, that you discriminated against a 6-year-old child out of fear and social anxiety." Gladys looked up at the doorbell camera, her face crumbling. "No, I didn't mean." "Noted," Warren said, and closed the door. He downloaded the footage immediately, backed it up to 3 different drives, sent a copy to Ezekiel. Phase 2 was complete. Now came the finale. Chapter 7, Exposure. The emergency hearing for Max's trust fund took place on a Tuesday morning in mid-May, 2 weeks after the earthquake. Warren arrived with Ezekiel and a box of documentation. Howard showed up with his attorney, Lawrence Weiss, a shark in a $1,000 suit. Alana sat in the gallery with Max. Warren had told Max they were fixing something that belonged to him, but kept the details vague. Max brought his coloring book. Judge Caitlin Haas, a stern woman in her 50s with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings, reviewed the filings with increasing displeasure. Mr. Weiss, she said, your client was executor of Edmund Alexander's estate. The will explicitly states that trust funds shall be distributed to all grandchildren by blood or legal adoption. Max Alexander was legally adopted 18 months ago. Why has a share not been distributed? Your Honor, Weiss began, there was confusion about whether the adoption finalized before or after. The adoption was finalized, Ezekiel interrupted, producing documents. 16 months before Edmund Alexander's death. Max was legally recognized as Warren Alexander's son, and therefore Edmund's grandson, before the testator died. There's no confusion. There's only willful omission. Howard leaned forward. I didn't think. Silence. Judge Haas snapped. You didn't think, or you deliberately excluded an heir from his inheritance? Which is it? Howard's attorney whispered urgently in his ear. Howard slumped back. Judge Haas continued. I'm ordering a full forensic accounting of Edmund Alexander's estate. All distributions are frozen until this accounting is complete. Mr. Howard Alexander, if it's determined that you deliberately withheld funds from a legally entitled heir, I will refer this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. The gavel fell. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Warren had expected this. Jewel's article had made the case national news. Cameras, microphones, shouted questions. Mr. Alexander, how does it feel to sue your own parents? Warren, is it true they stole from your son? What do you want people to know about adoption discrimination? Warren stopped, Max's hand in his. He'd prepared for this moment. I want people to know that adopted children are real children. They deserve the same love, protection, and rights as biological children. My parents' actions during the earthquake and in managing my grandfather's estate sent a message that adopted children are less worthy. That message is wrong. That message is harmful. And that message ends here. Max tugged his hand. Warren looked down. Dad, can we go get ice cream now? The cameras caught it. That simple, innocent request. Max, oblivious to the chaos, just wanting ice cream with his father. The internet melted. That clip played on every news station that evening. After confronting family in court, Max just wants ice cream. Wednesday brought a new development, Perry's custody hearing. Warren attended as a character witness, bringing documentation of Max's positive interactions with Perry's children. Brenda's attorney tried to paint Warren as a vindictive liar manipulating Perry. Perry's attorney countered with Brenda's own social media posts. Months of content disparaging adopted children, positioning her own kids as superior. Your Honor, Perry testified, I can't have my children raised in an environment where they're taught that some people are worth less based on how they joined a family. My wife and her parents made a choice during that earthquake, a choice that haunts me. They chose 3 children over 1. How do I explain that to my sons? How do I tell them that's acceptable? The judge awarded Perry primary custody, pending full evaluation. Brenda collapsed, sobbing. Warren felt no satisfaction, only grim completion. Thursday, the forensic accounting results arrived. Ezekiel called Warren at 9 a.m. Warren, you need to sit down. That bad. Worse. Max's share of the trust fund should have been $175,000. Howard distributed $180,000 to each of Brenda's kids, over their actual entitlements, using what should have been Max's share to pad theirs. Warren closed his eyes. So he didn't just forget Max. He actively stole from him to give extra to the biological grandchildren. Yes, and that's felony embezzlement of trust assets. The DA is already moving forward with charges. Ezekiel, I don't want them in prison. Warren, this isn't your choice anymore. They broke the law. The state prosecutes crimes. Your opinion doesn't matter. Warren thought about Max, coloring peacefully in the next room. Justice versus mercy. Consequence versus compassion. Let the system work, Warren said finally. Whatever happens, happens. Friday evening, 1 month after the earthquake, Warren's phone rang. Unknown number. Warren, it's Brenda. He almost hung up, but something in her voice, broken, raw, made him listen. I lost everything, she said. Perry took the kids. My followers are gone. Brand deals canceled. Mom and Dad might go to prison. And it's all my fault. Yes, Warren said simply. I was raised to believe blood matters more than anything. That adopted kids are less. Mom and Dad said it 1,000 times growing up. I just absorbed it. Brenda's voice cracked. But I see it now. God, Warren, I see it. What we did to Max, to you, it's unforgivable. Then why are you calling? To tell you I'm not fighting anymore. Perry, you should have the kids. They deserve better than what I can give them right now. And to tell you I'm sorry. Not because I want anything from you. Just because you deserve to hear it. Warren was silent for a long moment. Brenda, do you know what the worst part is? Max asked me if you'd ever love him like you love your kids. And I had to tell him no. Brenda's sob was audible. That's what you took from him, Warren continued. Not safety during an earthquake, though you took that too. You took his belief that family means unconditional love. He's 6, and he already knows that some people will always see him as less. I'm so sorry. Noted. Warren hung up. Chapter 8, Judgment. The criminal trial of Howard Alexander began on a sweltering July morning. Warren didn't attend most of it. Ezekiel kept him updated, but he went for the verdict. Howard sat at the defense table, looking diminished. Gladys sat behind him, her face gray. The jury had deliberated for 3 hours. On the charge of embezzlement of trust assets, how do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. Howard dropped his head into his hands. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Howard's attorney argued for probation. First offense, age, no flight risk, family man. The prosecutor countered with evidence of deliberate discrimination, systematic exclusion of a minor child from his rightful inheritance, years of emotional abuse. Judge Haas sentenced Howard to 2 years in state prison, with possibility of parole after 1 year, plus full restitution to Max, $175,000 plus interest, totaling $197,000. Mr. Alexander, Judge Haas said, you violated a sacred trust, both as executor of an estate and as a grandfather. You allowed prejudice against adoption to corrupt your legal and moral duties. This sentence reflects the seriousness of your actions. Howard was led away in handcuffs. Gladys wailed. Warren felt nothing but tired relief. The civil case settled out of court. Howard and Gladys agreed to a consent judgment, admitting their actions during the earthquake constituted child endangerment and infliction of emotional distress. They agreed to a permanent restraining order, no contact with Max without Warren's explicit written permission. And they agreed to a public apology, read into the court record, available to media. The apology was read by their attorney, their voices apparently unable to do it themselves. We, Howard and Gladys Alexander, acknowledge that on May 12, 2024, we made a conscious decision to prioritize our biological grandchildren over our adopted grandson, Max Alexander. We left Max alone in a dangerous situation because we viewed him as less important due to his adopted status. This was wrong. Our actions were harmful, discriminatory, and inexcusable. We apologize to Max and Warren Alexander. We acknowledge that our behavior throughout Max's time in our family has been characterized by exclusion, discrimination, and emotional cruelty. We're deeply sorry. It was enough. Not forgiveness. Warren would never give them that. But acknowledgement. Public record. Permanent consequences. Brenda's fall from grace was swift and comprehensive. At Brenda Flomom was deleted after her follower count dropped to 3,000. Her divorce was finalized with Perry receiving full custody. Brenda got supervised visitation once a month. She moved to Oregon, taking a job in retail. No more influencer lifestyle. No more perfect family brand. Just consequence. Warren heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd started therapy, was working on unpacking lifelong prejudices. He hoped it was real. For her kid's sake, if nothing else. August brought an unexpected development. The story of Max's case had inspired California legislators to introduce the Max Alexander Act, a law requiring that adoptive children be treated identically to biological children in all matters of inheritance, custody, and family law. Discriminatory treatment in emergencies or disasters would carry enhanced penalties. Warren was invited to Sacramento to testify before the committee. He brought Max. Standing before the California State Assembly, Warren told the story one more time. But he ended differently. Max is not a victim. He's a survivor. He's strong, resilient, and more forgiving than anyone in this room. But he shouldn't have to be. No adopted child should have to prove their worth to their own family. This law won't change hearts. That's harder work. But it will create consequences for those whose hearts refuse to change. The committee members gave him a standing ovation. The Max Alexander Act passed unanimously, signed into law by the governor in September. Max's picture, in his earthquake safety gear, smiling, hung in the Capitol building with a plaque, in honor of Max Alexander and all adopted children who deserve equal protection and love. Chapter 9. Aftermath. October brought the first real cold snap of autumn. Warren stood in his backyard, watching Max play with the neighbor kids, including Perry's 3 boys who visited every weekend. Max was teaching Hayden how to build a block tower properly, patient and encouraging. Alana joined Warren, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. Ezekiel called. Howard's parole hearing is scheduled for next summer, and he wanted to know if you'd oppose it. Warren considered. Howard had served 8 months. By all accounts, he'd been a model prisoner, quiet, compliant, attending every counseling session offered. No, Warren said. I won't oppose it. Alana looked surprised. Really, this was never about punishment for punishment's sake. It was about consequences, about making sure they understood what they did. Warren sipped his coffee. Howard understands now. Whether he's in prison or out, he's lost everything that mattered to him. Reputation, social standing, his perfect family image. That's the real sentence. What about Gladys? She writes letters. Every week. Asks if she can see Max, apologizes. Begs. What do you tell her? Nothing. I save the letters. When Max is older, if he wants a relationship with them, he can decide. But that's his choice. Not theirs. Not mine. Alana leaned against him. You did the right thing. Did I? Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. If Max will resent me for turning his grandparents into villains. Warren, you didn't turn them into villains. You held them accountable for being villains. There's a difference. November brought Max's 7th birthday. Warren and Alana threw a party. Max's entire 1st grade class, plus Perry and his boys, plus half the neighborhood. The house was chaos. Screaming kids, spilled juice, a piñata incident that would become legendary. In the middle of it all, Max pulled Warren aside. Dad, can I ask you something? Always, buddy. Why don't Grandma and Grandpa come to my birthdays? Warren's heart clenched. They'd avoided this conversation for months. Because they made bad choices, Max. And sometimes when people make bad choices, there are consequences. Did they choose not to love me? No. I think they did love you, in their way. But they loved the idea of perfect grandchildren. Grandchildren who looked like them, who were connected by blood, more than they loved you as you are. And that's not real love. Max thought about this seriously. I love you and Mom. Is that real love? Yes, buddy. That's the realest love there is. Okay. Max smiled, satisfied, and ran back to his friends. Warren watched him go. This small, resilient, beautiful human who'd taught Warren more about love than anyone else ever had. Max had survived abandonment twice. Once by his biological parents, once by his adoptive grandparents. And yet he remained kind, open, hopeful. That was the real victory. Not the lawsuits, not the public humiliation, not the criminal convictions. The victory was Max, thriving despite everything, surrounded by people who loved him unconditionally. December. Christmas morning. Warren woke to Max jumping on the bed. Presents. Presents. Santa came. They went downstairs. Alana filming on her phone, Warren making coffee, and Max touring his gifts with the unrestrained joy of childhood. Books, Legos, a new bike, art supplies. Then Max found an envelope at the bottom of his stocking. He opened it, puzzled. Dad, what's this? Warren knelt beside him. That's your college fund. Remember Grandpa Howard had to pay you money? That's what we're doing with it. That's yours for your future. That's a lot of zeros. It is. You could do anything you want with it someday. Max hugged Warren tight. I want to be a writer like you and help kids who don't have families. Warren's throat closed. Of course. Of course this beautiful child would take his pain and turn it into purpose. You can do that, buddy. You could do anything. 3 weeks later, Warren received one final piece of closure. An email from a literary agent he'd queried months ago. Warren had written a new novel. Not a thriller this time. A literary fiction piece about a family torn apart by prejudice and rebuilt through love. He called it The Last Choice. The agent loved it. 3 publishers bid on it. Warren sold it for a substantial advance, with one condition. 50% of all proceeds would go to the National Adoption Foundation. The book will be dedicated to Max. February. Warren's doorbell rang. He answered to find Gladys standing there, thinner and older, holding a small wrapped box. "I know I'm not supposed to be here," she said immediately. "I know about the restraining order. But I had to. Just once, I had to try. You're violating a court order. I know. Call the police if you want. But please, just listen." Warren didn't move to let her in, but he didn't close the door. Gladys's hand shook. "I've been in therapy. Real therapy. Working on understanding why I was so cruel. The therapist says it's generational trauma, learned behavior, fear of the unknown. But those are just words. The truth is I was wrong. Fundamentally, unforgivably wrong. I know. This is for Max." She held out the box. It was Edmund's, your grandfather's. His pocket watch. He wanted each grandson to have something of his. "I kept Max's. That was wrong, too." Warren took the box. Inside was a beautiful antique pocket watch, engraved. "For Max, with love from great-grandfather Edmund." He knew about Max? Warren asked, shocked. Yes. Edmund was thrilled about the adoption. Said he always wanted a big family. Didn't matter how it came together. He died a month after Max came home. He asked me specifically to make sure Max got this. Gladys's tears fell freely. And I kept it, because I thought it shouldn't go to an adopted child. Because I'm a terrible person. Warren looked at the watch, at Gladys, at the years of pain wrapped up in this small moment. "Thank you for bringing this," he said finally. "Max will treasure it." "Warren, is there any chance?" "No." His voice was gentle but firm. "Maybe someday, when Max is older, if he decides he wants to know you. But that's his choice. You don't get to decide anymore." Gladys nodded, broken. She turned to leave, then paused. "He looks happy. In the pictures online, in the news stories. He looks so happy. He is. Good. That's good." Warren watched her walk away, get into her car, drive off. He held Edmund's pocket watch, feeling the weight of generations. That evening, he gave it to Max. This was great-grandfather Edmund's. He wanted you to have it. Max turned it over carefully. "Did he love me?" "Yes, buddy. He did. Even though I'm adopted? Because you're his grandson. That's all that mattered to him." Max smiled, that brilliant, unguarded smile. "I wish I could have met him." "Me too." Spring came. Max started second grade. Warren's novel sold 10,000 copies in the first week. The Max Alexander Act resulted in 3 prosecutions of adoption discrimination in California. And Warren Alexander, who'd started this journey with rage and hurt, found something unexpected. Peace. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. But the quiet knowledge that he'd protected his son, held his family accountable, and changed a small part of the world for the better. One evening, as Warren tucked Max in a bed, Max asked the question that had been building all year. "Dad, do you think Grandma and Grandpa are sorry?" "Yes," Warren said honestly. "I think they are. Does that make it okay?" "No. Being sorry doesn't erase what happened. But it's a start. Do you think I'll ever want to see them?" "I don't know, buddy. Maybe. Maybe not. Both answers are okay." Max nodded, satisfied. "Dad, I'm glad you're my dad." Warren kissed his forehead. "I'm glad you're my son. Always will be. Nothing will ever change that." As Warren turned off the light, Max's voice came through the darkness. "Dad, thank you for not leaving me." Warren's eyes burned. "Never, Max. Never." Epilogue. 5 years later, Max Alexander, age 11, stood in front of his 6th grade class giving a presentation on adoption rights. Behind him, a PowerPoint slide showed a picture of a 6-year-old boy in earthquake safety gear, smiling at the camera. "This is me," Max said. 5 years ago, my grandparents decided I wasn't worth saving during an earthquake because I was adopted. But my dad decided that their choice wasn't the end of the story. He fought for me. He changed laws for me. He showed me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. The class was silent, transfixed. The Max Alexander Act has protected over 200 adopted kids in California since 2024, Max continued. But more than that, my story changed how people think about adoption. Not because of what happened to me, but because my dad refused to let people pretend it didn't matter. Max's teacher, Mrs. Graciela Ayers, had tears in her eyes. My grandparents live in Texas now, Max said. I met them twice. They are trying. I don't know if we'll ever be close. But I know who I am. I'm Max Alexander. I'm adopted. And I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The class erupted in applause. That evening, Warren attended Max's school performance. A play Max had written about a boy finding his real family. It was funny, heartfelt, and surprisingly sophisticated for an 11-year-old. After the show, Max ran to Warren and Alana. Did you like it? It was perfect, Warren said. Just like you. Dad, you're going to make me cry in front of everyone. That's my job. As they walked to the car, Max between them, Warren thought about the journey that had brought them here. The earthquake, the betrayal, the lawsuits, the consequences, the slow, painful rebuilding. It hadn't been about revenge, not really. It had been about protection, about ensuring that Max never doubted his worth, never questioned his place in the family, never carried the burden of others' prejudices. And it had worked. Max was strong. Max was confident. Max knew he was loved unconditionally. That was the only victory that mattered. Hey, Dad, Max asked, when I grow up, I want to be a lawyer. Help adopted kids who get treated badly. Warren smiled. You'd be an amazing lawyer. I want to write books. Like you. You could do both. Cool. Max kicked a stone down the sidewalk. Oh, and I want a dog. Alana laughed. We'll talk about the dog. Warren looked up at the stars, thinking of all the choices that had led to this moment. All the paths that had brought Max into his life. All the pain that had forged something stronger. He told his son that blood didn't make family. Love made family. Choice made family. And every day, Warren chose Max. Again and again. That was the story. Not of revenge, but of love proving itself stronger than prejudice. Not of destruction, but of protection. The story of how a father saved his son, not just from a collapse table during an earthquake, but from a family that would have taught him he was lesser. The story of how consequences met cruelty and love won. The last choice Howard and Gladys Alexander made, to leave Max behind, became the first choice of many that Warren made, to never let his son feel forgotten again. And in the end, that was everything. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Grind. Ryan Mitchell's hands were stained with grease and exhaustion as he clocked out of his third consecutive overnight shift at the industrial plant. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across his weathered face. At 34, the former Marine had the kind of build that came from years of discipline and hard work. Broad shoulders, calloused hands, and eyes that missed nothing. The drive home through the pre-dawn darkness gave him time to think about the stack of bills he'd been chipping away at for months. Tiffany's credit card debt had spiraled to nearly $40,000. Designer clothes, spa treatments, expensive dinners with her girlfriends while he ate gas station sandwiches between shifts. She'd come to him crying 6 months ago, claiming she'd made some mistakes and needed help. Ryan had believed her tears were genuine. He'd always been a man who honored his commitments, and marriage was the ultimate commitment. When Tiffany Lambert had walked into his life 3 years ago at his buddy's barbecue, she'd seemed like everything he wasn't: spontaneous, artistic, full of laughter. Her strawberry blonde hair caught the sunlight, and her green eyes sparkled with mischief. She worked part-time in art gallery, more for fun than necessity, she told him. Coming from his military background where loyalty meant everything, Ryan had courted her properly. 6 months of dates, meeting her family, proposing with his grandmother's ring. Her mother Gloria had seemed pleased enough, though Ryan always sensed she thought Tiffany was settling. The wedding had been modest by Tiffany's standards, but had drained Ryan's savings. Now, pulling into the driveway of their small ranch house in suburban Phoenix, Ryan felt the weight of sacrifice in his bones. He'd taken the overnight shifts specifically because they paid 30% more, enough to cover the minimum payments on Tiffany's debt while still managing their mortgage and bills. She'd promised to get a full-time job to help, but somehow that never materialized. There was always an excuse. The gallery needed her for special events, or she was networking for her art career, or she wasn't feeling well. Ryan had grown up poor, the son of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. He'd learned early that actions mattered more than words, that sacrifice was how you showed love. His mother had died of a heart attack during his second deployment to Afghanistan, working herself to death to pay for his youngest sister's college. He'd promised himself then that he'd never let the people he loved struggle the way she had. The house was dark except for the porch light Tiffany always left on for him. She'd be asleep, of course. Her art gallery job, when she actually showed up, didn't start until 10 in the morning. Ryan had suggested she might pick up some extra evening work since he was covering nights, but she'd looked at him like he'd suggested she become a street performer. He sat in his truck for a moment, looking at their home. The mortgage was in his name, bought with his military housing benefit. The furniture, the cars, even Tiffany's jewelry, all purchased with his earnings or credit. She contributed maybe $800 a month on a good month, barely enough to cover groceries. But marriage was about partnership, he reminded himself. She brought other things to their relationship: creativity, social connections, warmth. At least, that's what he kept telling himself during the long, solitary hours feeding materials into industrial machines while she slept in their comfortable bed. Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from his shift supervisor. Double overtime available next week if you want it. He stared at the message, thumb hovering over the reply. The overtime would finally clear the last of Tiffany's debt. 3 months of 16-hour days, living on energy drinks and determination, but it would be done. He typed back, "I'll take it." As he walked to the front door, Ryan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Tomorrow, he'd surprise Tiffany with the news that her debt was gone. Maybe they could finally start building something together instead of just surviving. Maybe she'd see how much he'd sacrificed and realize what they had was worth fighting for. The key turned silently in the lock. Years of military training had taught him to move quietly. He was already planning the conversation, imagining her face when he showed her the final payment confirmation. For the first time in months, Ryan Mitchell allowed himself to hope. Chapter 2. The Truth Revealed. 3 weeks later, Ryan stood in the shower at the plant, letting the hot water wash away another night's worth of chemical residue and sweat. The final payment had gone through that morning. $847.32, the last of Tiffany's crushing debt. He'd watched his checking account balance drop to nearly zero, but the satisfaction was worth it. Tonight, he'd drive home with the paid-in full receipt and finally tell his wife they could breathe again. The drive home felt different this time. Instead of the usual weight of financial pressure, Ryan felt lighter. They could start over now. Maybe Tiffany would finally commit to finding steady work, and they could begin saving for the future they'd talked about. Maybe even starting a family. He'd stopped in an all-night diner and bought 2 cups of their best coffee and Tiffany's favorite chocolate croissants. She'd probably be awake soon anyway, and this would be the perfect way to share the good news. For once, he'd be bringing home celebration instead of exhaustion. The neighborhood was quiet at 6:30 a.m., most houses still dark behind drawn curtains. Ryan pulled into his driveway and sat for a moment, savoring the anticipation. In his jacket pocket, the receipt crinkled softly. $40,000 of debt, eliminated through sheer force of will and endless overnight shifts. As he approached the front door, he heard Tiffany's voice through the living room window. She was on the phone, laughing in that bright, musical way that had first attracted him. Maybe she was talking to her sister Lindsay, who lived in California. Ryan paused, not wanting to interrupt what sounded like a happy conversation. "Oh my God, Mom. You should have seen his face when I told him about the debt," Tiffany was saying, her voice carrying easily through the single-pane window. "Like a lost puppy. I swear, sometimes I think he'd work himself to death if I asked him to." Ryan's hand froze on the door handle. Something cold settled in his stomach. "No, no, the idiot actually did it," Tiffany continued, and Ryan could hear Gloria's cackle on the other end of the line. $40,000, Mom. 40,000. And he never even questioned most of it. All those shopping trips I took with Brad, spa weekends, that jewelry, he just kept making payments like a good little soldier. The coffee cups slipped from Ryan's other hand, hitting the concrete porch with a muffled thud. But he couldn't move to pick them up. Couldn't breathe properly. "Yes, the whole Brad situation is handled now," Tiffany was saying, and Ryan could hear her moving around the living room. "The debt was the only thing keeping me here, you know? I couldn't afford a decent divorce lawyer with all those payments hanging over me. But now, what about the house?" Gloria's voice was tinny but audible through the phone speaker. "That's the beauty of it, Mom. It's all in his name. The mortgage, everything. Arizona's a community property state, so I'm entitled to half the value, but I won't be stuck with the payments. And since I haven't worked full-time in 2 years, I'll probably get alimony too." Ryan's vision began to narrow, tunnel-like, the way it had during his worst moments in combat. But this was different. In Afghanistan, at least he'd known who the enemy was. "Brad's already got the apartment picked out," Tiffany continued. "Downtown Phoenix, 20th floor, overlooking the valley. His consulting business is doing really well. Did I tell you he's buying into that restaurant franchise? 3 locations. I'll never have to worry about money again." "And Ryan has no idea?" Gloria asked. "About Brad? God, no. Ryan's too trusting for his own good. Too noble." She said the word like it tasted bitter. "He actually thinks all those late nights at the gallery were about work. As if I'd spend my evenings arranging other people's art for $8 an hour." The laughter that followed felt like glass breaking in Ryan's chest. "Honestly, Mother, I don't know how I stood it this long. The constant worrying about bills, living in this little house, driving that beat-up car. Ryan's a good man, but he's so limited. No ambition beyond showing up to work every day. Brad actually has vision, you know? Plans. When will you tell him?" "Soon. I was waiting for him to finish paying off the debt. Didn't want him to stop out of spite. But yes, the idiot paid it all off. Now I can finally afford a good divorce lawyer. Bradley knows someone who specializes in maximizing settlements for women. This is going to work out perfectly." Ryan stood frozen on his own porch, listening to his wife plan his destruction with the casual tone most people use to discuss weekend plans. Every sacrifice he'd made, every double shift, every time he'd chosen her comfort over his own needs, it had all been theater to her. He was a resource to be mined until depleted, then discarded. His hand found the receipt in his pocket, paid in full, the final proof of his devotion, and the key to his wife's escape. Quietly, Ryan placed the receipt on the doormat, where Tiffany would find it when she eventually emerged from their house. He walked back to his truck, started the engine, and drove away. For the first time in months, Ryan Mitchell had no destination in mind. But for the first time in his adult life, he understood what it felt like to be truly, completely alone. Chapter 3. The Call. 2 weeks passed in a blur of cheap motels and long drives through the Arizona desert. Ryan had called in sick to work, something he'd never done in 3 years at the plant. His supervisor, Jerry, had sounded concerned on the phone, but Ryan had assured him it was just a family emergency that needed sorting out. That wasn't entirely a lie. He'd been staying at an extended-stay motel off I-17, paying weekly rates and trying to figure out what came next. The place smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams, but it was clean and anonymous. Ryan had always been a man who needed to process things alone, and the small room with its functional furniture and thin walls suited his current state of mind. His phone had been ringing constantly for the first week. Tiffany, her friends, even Gloria calling to check on him. He'd turned it off after the 3rd day, needing silence to think. When he finally powered it back on, there were 37 missed calls and twice as many text messages. The text started concerned and gradually became frustrated. Where are you? Are you okay? Ryan, this isn't funny. Come home so we can talk. People are asking questions. You're embarrassing me. Fine. Be childish. But you can't avoid this forever. Ryan deleted them all without responding. He'd driven past their house twice, both times seeing Brad Coleman's silver BMW in the driveway. Brad was exactly what Ryan had expected. Tall, lean, the kind of man who looked like he'd never worked with his hand a day in his life. Ryan had done his research at the motel's business center, learning everything he could about Bradley Coleman. Age 36, marketing consultant, recently divorced, no children. Brad's social media painted a picture of expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Scottsdale, and a lifestyle that probably cost more in a month than Ryan made in 3. His LinkedIn showed a pattern of jumping between consulting firms every 2 years, always seeking new challenges. His divorce records, available through public documents, showed he'd been ordered to pay substantial alimony to his ex-wife for adultery. Apparently, Brad Coleman had a type. On a Thursday morning, Ryan's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Phoenix area code. Something told him to answer. Mr. Mitchell? This is David Park from Sterling, Park & Associates. I represent your wife in a dissolution of marriage matter. Ryan sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the water stain on the opposite wall. I see. Mrs. Mitchell has been concerned about your welfare, sir. She's asked me to reach out and see if we might arrange a meeting to discuss the terms of your separation. I understand this is a difficult time, but these matters are generally resolved more amicably when both parties engage constructively. The lawyer's voice had that practiced smoothness that came from years of delivering bad news to people who thought their lives were stable. Mr. Mitchell, are you there? I'm here, Ryan said quietly. Good. Now, Mrs. Mitchell has indicated that you've been experiencing some emotional difficulties following the revelation of her relationship with Mr. Coleman. She wants you to know that she hopes this process can be handled with minimal trauma for everyone involved. Ryan's grip tightened on the phone. Minimal trauma. That's correct. She's prepared to be quite reasonable in the property division, given the circumstances. Of course, there will need to be discussions about alimony and the disposition of the marital residence, but she's optimistic we can reach a fair agreement. Fair, Ryan repeated. Mr. Mitchell, I have to ask, do you have legal representation? Because if not, I'd strongly recommend you retain counsel before we proceed with any formal negotiations. Ryan stood up and walked to the motel window. Across the parking lot, a woman was loading suitcases into her car while 2 young children waited in the back seat. Starting over, just like he was supposed to do. Mr. Park, Ryan said finally. Can I ask you something? Certainly. How long have you been doing this kind of work? 15 years, Mr. Mitchell. I've handled hundreds of dissolution cases. And in your experience, how often do the cheating spouses end up happy with their new lives? There was a pause. I'm not sure I understand the relevance of that question. Just curious about the success rate. Professionally speaking. Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Mitchell, I think it would be best if we scheduled a meeting. Are you available tomorrow afternoon? Actually, Mr. Park, I don't think that will be necessary. Sir, tell my wife, tell Mrs. Mitchell, that she shouldn't worry about me being reasonable. I've been reasonable for 3 years. I've been understanding and accommodating and everything a good husband should be. But I'm done being reasonable now. I'm not sure I follow. You will, Ryan said, and hung up. He sat back down on the bed and opened his laptop. Time to stop reacting and start planning. Tiffany and Brad thought they were dealing with a heartbroken, naive husband who would quietly accept whatever terms they offered. They were about to learn they were wrong about a lot of things. Ryan had spent his entire adult life following rules, honoring commitments, taking the high road. He'd been a good soldier, a faithful husband, a man who believed that doing the right thing mattered. But they'd changed the rules without telling him. And Ryan Mitchell was very, very good at adapting to new operational parameters. Chapter 4, Reconnaissance. Ryan checked out of the motel the next morning and found a furnished apartment in Tempe, close enough to Phoenix to monitor the situation, but far enough away to maintain operational security. The place was nothing special, 1 bedroom, basic furniture, but it came with a month-to-month lease and no questions asked. His first stop was a visit to his old Marine buddy, Tony Reeves, who ran a private investigation firm specializing in corporate security and domestic cases. Tony operated out of a strip mall office that looked unremarkable from the outside, but housed some of the most sophisticated surveillance equipment available to civilians. "Jesus, Mitch," Tony said, using Ryan's old military nickname as they sat in his office. "You look like hell." "Feel worse," Ryan replied. "I need a favor, Tony." "A big one." Tony leaned back in his chair, studying his old friend. They'd served 2 tours together in Afghanistan, and Tony knew Ryan better than most people. "This about your wife?" "Soon-to-be ex-wife." "And her boyfriend?" "Ah." Tony nodded knowingly. "You want surveillance?" "I want everything. Financial records, communications, travel patterns, business relationships. Everything legal, but I want to know more about these people than they know about themselves." Tony was quiet for a long moment. "This going to stay legal, Mitch?" "The investigation will be. What I do with the information, that's going to depend on what we find." "That's not exactly reassuring." Ryan met his friend's eyes. "Tony, this woman played a 3-year con on me. Made me work myself half to death paying off debt she accumulated sleeping with another man. She's taking half of everything I own and expecting alimony on top of it. Legal isn't getting me justice. It's getting me screwed twice." Tony sighed and opened a new file on his computer. "Tell me what you know." Over the next hour, Ryan provided everything he had on Tiffany and Brad. Tony took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Ryan finished, Tony leaned back and shook his head. "Your wife's got expensive taste for someone with no money," he observed. "These restaurant receipts you found, the hotel charges. This affair has been going on for at least 18 months, probably longer." "That's what I figured. And this Brad character, I know the type. Smooth talker, probably tells women exactly what they want to hear. His business model seems to be short-term consulting contracts with companies that don't do proper due diligence." Tony pulled up Brad's professional profile on his computer. "Look at this pattern. Joins a company, promises big results, collects his fee, then moves on before anyone realizes the results aren't sustainable. It's not exactly fraud, but it's not exactly honest either." "What about personal stuff?" "Well, his ex-wife is interesting. Melissa Coleman, remarried name is Torres now. Lives in Scottsdale, works as a real estate agent. According to the divorce filings, Brad was cheating on her too, with a client's wife, no less. She got a decent settlement, but more importantly, she might be willing to talk." Ryan nodded. "Set up a meeting." "What about your wife?" "What about her?" Tony pulled up another screen. "Tiffany's got some interesting financial habits. She's been living way above any reasonable income level for years. Credit cards maxed and paid off repeatedly, always just before they would have gone collections. Someone's been managing her debt very carefully. Meaning this isn't impulsive shopping. This is systematic. She's been planning something for a long time, and she's had help." Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Her mother? Probably. But here's the thing, Mitch, if they've been planning this, they've made mistakes. People always do when they think they're smarter than everyone else." Tony turned his monitor toward Ryan. "Your wife opened a new bank account 3 months ago. Business account, under the name TL Creative Consulting. She's been depositing money regularly, small amounts, but consistent. Where's the money coming from? That's what we're going to find out. But I'm betting when we trace it back, we're going to find some very interesting connections." Ryan stared at the account information. 3 months ago was right around the time Tiffany had started crying about her debt, begging him to help her. While he'd been working double shifts, she'd been opening secret accounts. "How long will this take?" "Give me a week for the basic workup. 2 weeks if you want the deep dive." "Deep dive," Ryan said without hesitation. "It's going to cost." "Tony." Ryan's voice was quiet but carried an edge that made his friend pause. "I've got $40,000 in savings that I was planning to use to start a family. Instead, I used it to pay off debt my wife accumulated while cheating on me. Whatever this costs, it's an investment." "Investment in what?" Ryan stood up, extending his hand to shake Tony's. "In making sure that actions have consequences." After leaving Tony's office, Ryan drove to the library and spent the rest of the day researching Arizona divorce law, community property statutes, and alimony requirements. He took pages of notes, cross-referencing different scenarios and outcomes. By the time he left, Ryan had a clear understanding of exactly how badly the legal system was about to screw him over. In Arizona, adultery wasn't grounds for denying alimony. Community property meant Tiffany was entitled to half of everything they'd acquired during the marriage, regardless of who earned it or who spent it foolishly. The system was designed to reward Tiffany's behavior and punish his loyalty. But systems had weaknesses. Every system did, and Ryan was very good at finding weaknesses. Chapter 5, The Setup. Melissa Torres agreed to meet Ryan at a coffee shop in Scottsdale, neutral territory, where she'd feel comfortable talking about her ex-husband. She was an attractive brunette in her early 30s, professionally dressed, but Ryan could see the wariness in her eyes when he approached her table. "You're sure you're not a reporter?" she asked as he sat down. "Just a man whose wife is making the same mistakes you did," Ryan replied honestly. Melissa studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Brad's type is very specific. Married women with money or access to money. He's got a gift for making them feel special, like they deserve better than whatever they have." "How long were you married?" "4 years. The affair I caught him in wasn't his first, just the first one I had proof of." She stirred her coffee absently. "He's very careful about covering his tracks, very good at manipulating situations, so he always comes out looking like the victim." "What do you mean?" "Brad doesn't just cheat. He strategically targets women he can profit from. The woman I caught him with was married to a man who owned a chain of restaurants." Suddenly Brad was consulting for restaurant management. Pure coincidence, right? Ryan felt pieces clicking into place. "What happened after your divorce?" "Brad tried to come back 6 months later, claiming he'd made a mistake, that he loved me. Turned out his restaurant consultation had ended badly. Something about promising results he couldn't deliver. He was probably looking for financial support while he found his next target." "Did he ever talk about future plans?" "Long-term goals." Melissa laughed bitterly. "Brad doesn't think long-term about anything except his next payday. But he did mention wanting to get into the restaurant business himself someday. Said he'd learned enough from his consulting work to know how to make one successful." After the meeting, Ryan drove to the Phoenix Art Gallery, where Tiffany claimed to work. The owner, a thin man in his 60s named Harrison Webb, seemed surprised when Ryan introduced himself as Tiffany's husband. "I didn't realize Tiffany was married," Harrison said, adjusting his glasses. "She's never mentioned a husband." "She's been working here for 3 years, Ryan said carefully. "Oh no, Mr. Mitchell. Tiffany hasn't worked here in over a year. She quit right around Christmas, said she was pursuing other opportunities." The lie was so casual, so complete, that Ryan almost admired its audacity. For months, Tiffany had been leaving the house every day, claiming to go to work at the gallery. Where had she actually been going? "Do you happen to remember what kind of opportunities she mentioned?" Harrison thought for a moment. "Something about event planning, I think. She said she'd met someone who was going to help her start her own business." Ryan thanked Harrison and left, his mind racing. Event planning, business opportunities. The mysterious bank account Tony had discovered suddenly made more sense. That evening, Ryan parked across the street from his old house and watched. At 7:30 p.m., Tiffany and Brad emerged, dressed for dinner. They climbed into Brad's BMW and drove toward downtown Phoenix. Ryan followed at a distance, his surveillance training making the tale easy and undetectable. They went to Vincent's, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Through the window, Ryan watched them celebrate something with champagne and dessert. Brad picked up the check without hesitation, and they lingered over coffee like they had all the time in the world. From the restaurant, they drove to a high-rise apartment complex in downtown Phoenix. The building was new, all glass and steel, with a doorman and valet parking. Ryan watched Brad hand his keys to the valet like he lived there. A quick conversation with the building's night security guard. Ryan claimed to be considering renting an apartment there, revealed that Brad Coleman had signed a lease 3 months ago for a 2-bedroom unit on the 20th floor. Monthly rent, $3,800. 3 months ago, the same time Tiffany had opened her business account and started crying about debt. Ryan sat in his truck across from the gleaming apartment building and felt the last of his illusions dissolve. This hadn't been an affair that got out of hand. This had been a coordinated campaign, planned and executed with military precision. They played him perfectly. The crying wife, the overwhelming debt, the need for his help. While he'd been working himself to exhaustion, they'd been planning their new life together in a luxury apartment he was indirectly paying for. His phone buzzed with a text from Tony. Got preliminary results. You need to see this ASAP. Ryan looked up at the apartment building one more time. Somewhere up there, his wife and her lover were probably toasting their success. Tomorrow, he'd learn exactly how deep their betrayal went. But tonight, Ryan Mitchell began planning their destruction. Chapter 6. The Foundation. Tony's office felt different the next morning, charged with the electric tension that came before bad news. Ryan sat across from his friend's desk while Tony organized a stack of documents and photographs. You were right about the planning, Tony began. This goes back almost 2 years, Mitch. Maybe longer. He slid the first document across the desk. Brad Coleman didn't just randomly meet your wife. He was hired by a restaurant called Meridian to consult on their marketing strategy 18 months ago. Guess who was catering their grand opening event? Ryan looked at the invoice. TL Creative Consulting. Your wife's been running a side business for almost 2 years, providing event planning and catering coordination for upscale venues. She never told you because the income would have meant she didn't qualify for alimony. Tony slid over more documents. Here's where it gets interesting. Brad's consulting contract with Meridian was supposed to be 6 months, but he's been collecting payments for 18 months, and Meridian's revenue has actually declined in that time. He's bleeding them dry. Worse, he's positioned himself as indispensable while systematically undermining their profitability. When they finally collapse, and they will in the next few months, guess who's going to swoop in and buy the assets at bankruptcy prices? Ryan studied the financial projections Tony had compiled. Brad and Tiffany, through a shell company they established 4 months ago, BC Development, LLC. They've already secured preliminary financing based on projections that assume they'll acquire Meridian's customer base and equipment for pennies on the dollar. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. While Ryan had been working double shifts to pay off Tiffany's debt, she and Brad had been constructing an elaborate business scheme that would make them wealthy at the expense of everyone around them. There's more, Tony continued. Remember that debt you paid off? Most of it wasn't shopping sprees and spa days. It was startup capital, equipment purchases and corporation fees, insurance deposits, all disguised as personal expenses. So I funded their business venture. Without knowing it, yeah. And here's the beautiful part. Legally, they're probably in the clear. Deceptive as hell, but not technically fraud. Ryan sat back in his chair, processing the information. What about the restaurant they're targeting? Meridian? Family-owned business, been around for 12 years. The owner, Patricia Hendricks, is a widow trying to keep her late husband's dream alive. She's got 2 employees, both single mothers who've been with her since the beginning. Tony slid over a photograph of Patricia Hendricks, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. She has no idea what's happening to her business. All she knows is that revenue's been declining despite Brad's expensive marketing campaigns. Ryan studied the photo, thinking about his own situation. How many lives were Brad and Tiffany willing to destroy for their ambitions? What's their timeline? Based on the financing documents, they need to move within the next 60 days. Brad's been accelerating Meridian's decline, canceling successful advertising contracts, pushing expensive initiatives that don't generate revenue. Patricia's going to be forced into bankruptcy soon. And then they buy her out for maybe 20 cents on the dollar. She'll lose everything. They'll gain a profitable business. And legally, they've done nothing wrong. Ryan was quiet for several minutes, studying the documents. Finally, he looked up at Tony. I need you to do something else for me. What? I need you to arrange a meeting with Patricia Hendricks. Anonymously. Tell her someone wants to warn her about her marketing consultant. Tony frowned. Mitch, if you're thinking about exposing Brad's scheme. I'm not thinking about exposing it, Ryan said quietly. I'm thinking about something else entirely. Such as... Ryan gathered the documents and stood up. Brad and Tiffany want to play games with people's lives? Fine, but they're about to learn that some people play for keeps. That afternoon, Ryan met Patricia Hendricks at a restaurant during the slow period between lunch and dinner. Meridian was exactly the kind of place Ryan appreciated: honest food, reasonable prices, the kind of neighborhood establishment that formed the backbone of local communities. Patricia was as tired as her photograph suggested, but her handshake was firm and her eyes were intelligent. "Tony Reeves said you had information about my marketing consultant?" "I do," Ryan said, sitting across from her in a booth near the back. "But first, I want to ask you something. If you could save your restaurant, what would you be willing to do?" "Anything legal," she replied without hesitation. "Good, because what I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to hear, but it's going to give you a chance to fight back." Over the next hour, Ryan explained everything: Brad's systematic sabotage, the planned bankruptcy acquisition, the shell company waiting to scoop up her life's work. He showed her the financial projections, the timeline, the evidence of deliberate manipulation. Patricia listened in growing horror, occasionally asking for clarification, but mostly sitting in stunned silence. When Ryan finished, she sat back and closed her eyes. 18 months, she whispered. 18 months, I've been blaming myself, thinking I was failing somehow. You weren't failing. You were being destroyed by someone who saw your trust as a vulnerability to exploit. What can I do? I can't afford lawyers. I can't. "Mrs. Hendricks," Ryan said gently, "what if I told you there is a way to not only save your restaurant, but to make the people who tried to destroy it pay for what they've done?" She opened her eyes and looked at him. "I'd say that sounds too good to be true. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to require you to trust me even though you don't know me. But if you're willing to fight, I can give you the weapons you need." Patricia Hendricks had spent 18 months watching her husband's dream slowly die, believing it was her fault. Now she understood she'd been the victim of a carefully orchestrated campaign of destruction. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Ryan smiled for the first time in weeks. "I need you to pretend to be exactly as desperate as they think you are. And I need you to help me set a trap." Chapter 7. The Trap. Ryan spent the next week building what he privately called the foundation, a complex web of legal documents, financial arrangements, and strategic relationships that would support what came next. His years in the military had taught him that successful operations require detailed planning and multiple contingencies. His first stop was a meeting with Jennifer Walsh, one of Phoenix's most respected family law attorneys. Jennifer was known for her aggressive advocacy and her ability to find creative solutions to complex domestic situations. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, reviewing the documents Ryan had provided, "this is quite a situation. Your wife has been systematically deceiving you for years, but legally, you're still going to be at a disadvantage in the divorce proceedings. Because Arizona is a no-fault state." "Exactly. Her adultery doesn't impact property division or alimony calculations. She's entitled to half of the marital assets and potentially substantial spousal support, regardless of her behavior." Ryan nodded. "What if I could prove fraud?" Jennifer looked up sharply. "What kind of fraud?" "Identity theft. Forgery. Using marital assets for undisclosed business ventures." Ryan slid another document across her desk. "I hired a forensic accountant to examine our joint credit card statements. Tiffany forged my signature on at least 12 major purchases, claiming I had authorized them." Jennifer studied the forensic report, her eyebrows rising. "Mr. Mitchell, if this is accurate, your wife committed multiple felonies during your marriage. That changes everything." "How so?" "Arizona law allows courts to disproportionately divide marital assets when one spouse has dissipated community property through illegal activities. Instead of a 50-50 split, you could retain up to 80% of your assets." "And spousal support?" "She'd be lucky to get anything." Ryan had spent considerable time and money obtaining the forensic analysis, but it was worth it. Every signature Tiffany had forged, every fraudulent charge she'd made, was now documented evidence of criminal behavior. "What's the next step?" "We file for divorce immediately, citing fraud and identity theft. We also file for emergency asset protection to prevent her from liquidating or hiding property before the case is resolved." Jennifer paused, studying Ryan carefully. "Mr. Mitchell, I have to ask, are you planning to file criminal charges against your wife?" That depends on her behavior during the divorce proceedings. Meanwhile, Patricia Hendricks was playing her part perfectly. Following Ryan's instructions, she had approached Brad with desperation that wasn't entirely feigned, begging him to help save her failing restaurant. "I don't know what else to do," she told Brad during their meeting, which Ryan was recording through surveillance equipment Tony had provided. "Revenue's down 40% from last year. I'm 3 months behind on supplier payments." Brad adopted his most sympathetic expression. "Patricia, I've been trying to warn you about market conditions. The restaurant business is brutal right now. Is there anything you can do? Any strategy we haven't tried?" "Well," Brad said slowly, as if the idea was just occurring to him, "there might be one option, but it would require significant changes to your business model." "Anything. I'll try anything. I've been working with some investors who specialize in restaurant turnarounds. They might be willing to come in as partners, provide immediate capital injection, help modernize your operations." Patricia looked hopeful. "What would that involve?" "You'd retain operational control, of course, but they'd need majority ownership to justify the investment. Say 60-40 split." Ryan, listening to the recording later, marveled at Brad's audacity. He was offering to save Patricia's restaurant by stealing it from her and making it sound like he was doing her a favor. "I need to think about it," Patricia said. "Of course. But Patricia, these investors won't wait long. They have other opportunities they're considering." After Brad left, Patricia met with Ryan at a coffee shop across town. She looked shaken by the experience. "He's worse than you described," she said. "The way he talks, it's like he genuinely believes he's helping me." "Sociopaths often do," Ryan replied. "They're very good at justifying their behavior, even to themselves." "What happens now?" "Now we let him think he's won. Tell him you want to meet with his investors. Set up the meeting for next Friday evening, here at the restaurant after closing. And then—" Ryan's expression was cold. "Then Brad Coleman learns what happens when you try to destroy innocent people for profit." That same week, Ryan received a call from David Park, Tiffany's divorce attorney. "Mr. Mitchell, I understand you've retained counsel. I was hoping we could arrange a meeting between all parties to discuss settlement terms." "I'm not interested in settling," Ryan replied. "Sir, I think you should understand that litigation is expensive and time-consuming. Mrs. Mitchell is prepared to be reasonable." "Mr. Park," Ryan interrupted, "has your client mentioned her business activities to you?" There was a pause. "I'm not sure what you mean. Ask her about TL Creative Consulting. Ask her about BC Development, LLC. And ask her about the restaurant venture she's been planning with Brad Coleman." Another longer pause. "Mr. Mitchell, are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts that will come out during discovery. Facts that paint a very different picture of my wife's financial situation and her reasons for seeking divorce." Ryan hung up before the lawyer could respond. Within an hour, his phone was ringing with calls from Tiffany. He let them all go to voicemail. The messages started confused and escalated to angry. "What did you tell my lawyer? Call me back right now. Ryan, whatever you think you know, you're wrong. We need to talk. Stop being childish. I know you're hurt, but ruining my life won't make you feel better. Fine. If you want to play games, we'll play games. But you won't win." Ryan deleted the messages without listening to all of them. Tiffany was beginning to understand that her carefully constructed plan was falling apart, but she still didn't comprehend the scope of what was coming. That would change soon enough. Chapter 8: The Reckoning. Friday evening arrived with the kind of desert sunset that painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson. Ryan sat in Tony's surveillance van outside Meridian Restaurant, watching as Brad Coleman arrived for what he believed would be his final conquest of Patricia Hendricks' business. "All recording equipment is active," Tony reported from the driver's seat. "Video, audio, everything's crystal clear. And the backup? Jennifer Walsh is standing by at her office. The moment we get what we need, she'll file the emergency motions." Ryan watched Brad check his appearance in his car side mirror before walking into the restaurant. He was dressed in an expensive suit, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than most people made in a week. The picture of success built on other people's destruction. Inside the restaurant, Patricia Hendricks was setting the stage perfectly. The dining room was empty except for a single table set for 3, dim lighting creating an intimate atmosphere that would encourage Brad to be indiscreet. At 7 p.m. exactly, a woman entered the restaurant. Ryan recognized her immediately from the photographs Tony had compiled. Tiffany, dressed in business attire that looked like it had cost more than Ryan's monthly salary. Interesting, Tony murmured. Your wife's playing the role of silent investor. Through their surveillance equipment, Ryan could hear the conversation beginning inside. Patricia, I'd like you to meet my business partner, Brad was saying. Tiffany Lambert. She represents the investment group I mentioned. Ryan noted that Tiffany was using her maiden name, another layer of deception in case anything went wrong. Ms. Lambert, Patricia said, shaking Tiffany's hand. Thank you for considering my restaurant. Of course, Tiffany replied smoothly. Brad's told me wonderful things about Meridian. We're always looking for opportunities to support local businesses. The irony was breathtaking. These two people, who had spent the last 18 months systematically destroying Patricia's livelihood, were now positioning themselves as her saviors. Shall we discuss terms? Brad asked, opening his portfolio. For the next 30 minutes, Ryan listened as Brad and Tiffany outlined their investment proposal. They offered to purchase 60% of the restaurant for $40,000, roughly a tenth of what the business was actually worth. In exchange, they would provide operational expertise and marketing innovation. What they were really offering was to buy Patricia's life's work for less than the cost of her kitchen equipment, then rebrand it as their own success story. This is very generous, Patricia said, playing her role perfectly. But I have to ask, how can you be sure the restaurant will be profitable under new management? Brad smiled condescendingly. Patricia, the truth is, your marketing strategies have been outdated. What you need is fresh thinking, modern approaches to customer acquisition and retention. You mean the marketing strategies you've been implementing for 18 months? Brad's smile faltered slightly. Well, yes, but we were limited by budget constraints. With proper investment, the budget you recommended, Patricia continued. The advertising contracts you negotiated. The promotional campaigns you designed. Now Brad looked confused. Patricia, I'm not sure what you're getting at. Patricia reached under the table and brought out a folder. I'm getting at this, Mr. Coleman. She opened the folder and spread out the documents Ryan had provided. Financial projections showing Meridian's decline, evidence of Brad's systematic sabotage, proof of the shell company he and Tiffany had established. What is this? Tiffany asked, leaning forward to examine the papers. This is documentation of your plan to bankrupt my restaurant so you could buy it cheaply, Patricia said calmly. 18 months of deliberate sabotage, marketed as professional consultation. Brad's face went pale. Patricia, I don't know where you got this information, but I got it from someone who cares about justice, Patricia interrupted. Someone who understands what it's like to be betrayed by people you trusted. Tiffany was studying the documents, her expression growing more alarmed by the moment. These are confidential business plans, she said. How did you? She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she recognized something in the paperwork. Ryan, she whispered. That's right, Patricia said. Your husband provided all of this information, along with some very interesting details about your marriage and your business activities. Brad looked confused. Husband? Tiffany, you said you were single. I'm getting divorced, Tiffany said quickly, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Are you? Patricia asked. Because according to the divorce filings I've seen, your husband is claiming fraud, identity theft, forgery, the kind of charges that carry prison sentences. The restaurant fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Brad was staring at Tiffany with growing understanding, while Tiffany looked like she was trying to calculate her chances of escape. This is harassment, Brad said finally. We came here in good faith to help your business. You came here to steal my business, Patricia corrected. Just like you stole from your ex-wife. Just like you've stolen from every client who trusted you. She stood up and walked to the restaurant's front door, which she locked with a decisive click. What are you doing? Tiffany asked, alarm creeping into her voice. Making sure we finish this conversation, Patricia replied. In the surveillance van, Tony looked at Ryan. This is it. We've got them on tape admitting to the scheme, We've got evidence of their relationship, and we've got Tiffany using a false name in a business context. Ryan nodded. Call Jennifer. Tell her to file everything. But Ryan wasn't done yet. He got out of the van and walked across the street to Meridian's front door. Through the window, he could see Brad and Tiffany sitting frozen at their table, while Patricia stood with her arms crossed, blocking their exit. Ryan tried the door and found it locked. Patricia saw him and walked over to let him in. Hello, Tiffany, Ryan said as he entered the restaurant. Fancy meeting you here. His wife's face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, anger, and finally, a kind of desperate calculation. Ryan, she said, forcing a smile. This isn't what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like you and your boyfriend are trying to steal this woman's restaurant, just like you tried to steal my life. Brad started to stand up. Look, I don't know who you are, but sit down, Ryan said quietly, and something in his voice made Brad comply immediately. Ryan walked to the table and sat across from his wife. 3 years, Tiffany. 3 years of marriage, and it was all a lie. That's not true, she said, but her voice was weak. The debt I paid off wasn't shopping sprees, was it? It was startup capital for your business with Brad. You used me as an unwitting investor, then planned to divorce me and take half of everything else I owned. Tiffany's composed facade was cracking. You don't understand the pressure I was under. The expectations. Whose expectations? Your mother's? Brad's? Or just your own greed? Ryan leaned forward, his voice still calm, but carrying an edge that made everyone in the restaurant nervous. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to dissolve BC Development and return every penny you stole from Meridian's marketing budget to Patricia. You're going to sign a divorce agreement that gives you nothing. No alimony, no property settlement, nothing. And you're going to hope I don't decide to file criminal charges for identity theft and fraud. You can't, Brad started. I can, Ryan interrupted. I have forensic evidence of at least 15 felonies committed during my marriage. And now I have evidence of your conspiracy to defraud Patricia's business. The question is whether you cooperate or whether this ends with both of you in prison. Tiffany was crying now, but Ryan felt no sympathy. These weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration that her carefully constructed plan had failed. What do you want? She whispered. Ryan stood up and looked down at the woman he'd once loved. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything because of someone else's betrayal. He turned to Patricia. The restaurant is yours, free and clear. The evidence we've gathered will ensure they can't try this again with anyone else. To Brad, he said, your consulting business is finished in Phoenix. I'd suggest you find another city, preferably one where they don't check references too carefully. Ryan walked to the door, then paused and looked back at Tiffany one last time. You said I was too limited, too noble for my own good. You were wrong about the noble part. But you were right about one thing. I am limited. I'm limited by a moral code that prevented me from seeing what you really were. I won't make that mistake again. He unlocked the door and stepped out into the desert night, leaving his former life behind. Chapter 9. New Foundations. 6 months later, Ryan stood in the kitchen of Meridian Restaurant, helping Patricia prep for the lunch rush. The business had not just survived, it was thriving. Word had spread about Patricia's story, and the community had rallied around the restaurant with the kind of fierce loyalty that money couldn't buy. Order up, Patricia called, sliding 2 plates across the pass. Table 6. Ryan carried the meals to a young couple celebrating their anniversary. They thanked him with the kind of genuine warmth he'd forgotten existed. Simple interactions, honest work, people who meant what they said. It was a different world from the one he'd inhabited with Tiffany. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. Jennifer Walsh had proven as ruthless as advertised, using the evidence of Tiffany's fraud to secure a settlement that left Ryan with full ownership of their house, his retirement accounts, and even reimbursement for the debt he'd paid off. Tiffany had received exactly what she'd contributed to their marriage: nothing. The criminal charges had been another matter. Ryan had ultimately decided not to file them, not out of mercy, but out of pragmatism. Tiffany and Brad's scheme had collapsed so completely that pursuing criminal prosecution would have been like shooting at ghosts. Brad had left Phoenix within a week of the confrontation at Meridian, his reputation in ruins. The business community was small and interconnected, and word of his methods had spread quickly. His consulting practice had evaporated overnight. Tiffany had moved back in with her mother in Tucson, her dreams of restaurant ownership reduced to a part-time job at a coffee shop. The apartment she and Brad had shared was in foreclosure, another victim of their overextended ambitions. "Ryan," Patricia called from behind the counter. "Your friend Tony's here." Ryan walked over to where Tony was sitting at the bar, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee. "How's the PI business?" Ryan asked. "Can't complain. Actually had 3 new clients this week. All of them referred by attorneys who heard about our work on your case." Tony folded his newspaper and looked at his friend. "You look good, Mitch." "Relax. I feel good. Honest work, honest people, honest pay. Turns out that's all I ever really wanted. No regrets about the restaurant business?" Patricia offered to make you a partner. Ryan shook his head. "This isn't my dream, it's hers. I'm just helping her protect it." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the lunch crowd. Families, business people, elderly couples who'd been coming to Meridian for years, the kind of community that formed naturally around places that provided genuine value. "Ryan," Patricia called. "Phone for you." Ryan walked to the office and picked up the call. It was Jennifer Walsh. "Mr. Mitchell, I have some interesting news. Tiffany's mother called this morning." "Gloria? What did she want?" "She's concerned about her daughter's situation. Apparently, Tiffany's been having difficulty finding work, and Gloria was wondering if you might be willing to help with some financial support." Ryan was quiet for a long moment. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that ship had sailed, but I wanted you to know in case she tries to contact you directly." "She won't," Ryan said with certainty. "Gloria is smarter than that. There's something else. I got a call from an attorney in Tucson representing someone named Bradley Coleman." Ryan's attention sharpened. "What does Brad want?" "He's claiming you interfered with his business relationships, cost him income and reputation. He's threatening to sue for damages." Ryan actually laughed. "Let him try. We have hours of recorded evidence of him committing fraud. Any lawsuit he files will just give us another forum to present that evidence publicly." That's what I told his attorney. "I don't think we'll hear from him again." After hanging up, Ryan returned to the dining room, where Patricia was dealing with a minor crisis. They'd run out of their signature dessert and had 3 tables asking for it. "We could make more," she said, "but it takes 2 hours to set properly." "What about that bakery down the street?" Ryan suggested. "Their chocolate cake is almost as good as yours. We could offer it as a substitute with a discount." Patricia nodded and made the call. The customers were understanding, even appreciative of the honesty and the discount. Problems solved through straightforward communication. Another concept that felt revolutionary after years of living with deception. As the day wound down, Ryan found himself thinking about the path that had brought him here. A year ago, he'd been working overnight shifts to pay off debt he didn't know was fraudulent, married to a woman who saw him as a resource to be exploited. Now, he was part of a community, contributing to something that mattered, surrounded by people who valued honesty over manipulation. The phone call from Gloria had been predictable. Narcissists always came back when they needed something, convinced that their previous victims would eventually forget and forgive. But Ryan's capacity for forgiveness had been permanently altered by Tiffany's betrayal. He'd learned the difference between mercy and enabling, between compassion and weakness. Some people deserved second chances. Others had forfeited their right to his consideration. As closing time approached, Patricia started cleaning the coffee machine while Ryan wiped down tables. The routine had become comfortable, purposeful in a way his old life had never been. "Ryan," Patricia said, not looking up from her work, "I want you to know something." "What's that?" "When you first approached me about Brad and Tiffany, I thought you might be just another angry ex-husband looking for revenge. What changed your mind?" "The way you insisted on protecting my employees during the confrontation. The way you made sure they got bonuses when the business improved. The way you turned down partnership in the restaurant because you said it belonged to me and my family." Patricia finally looked at him. "Revenge would have been about hurting them. What you did was about protecting people. There's a difference." Ryan nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Revenge was personal, selfish, ultimately unsatisfying. Justice was about restoring balance, protecting the innocent,